Welcome to the SIDS and Harm Reduction through Safe Sleep Practices training video. I am Dominique Teaford, a public health nurse for the County of Santa Cruz. This training was developed in collaboration with our nurse intern, Yesenia Camposano Ramirez, this spring. It was also inspired by materials shared by our former SIDS coordinator, Kimlin Keith. In this training video, we will define SIDS, sudden infant death, which is still sometimes referred to as SUID, sudden unexpected infant death. We will address barriers around safe sleep practices and identify how to reduce harm through evidence-based practice. Sudden infant death is the sudden, unexplained death of a baby younger than 1 year of age that doesn't have a known cause, even after a complete investigation. The investigation includes performance of a complete autopsy, examination of the death scene, and review of the clinical history. This chart shows the breakdown of sudden unexpected infant death by cause. Now, all of these types of infant death are considered SIDS. Though you may have heard the term sudden unexpected infant death, SUID, there was a recent decision made by the California SIDS Advisory to return to the use of SIDS because it causes less confusion for families. SIDS has existed for centuries and is discussed in many historical texts. It was often blamed on natural causes. And with more recent advances in data tracking, we've learned that SIDS can be associated with unsafe sleeping conditions. The SIDS rate shown in this graph is broken down by sudden infant death syndrome, death by unknown cause, and accidental suffocation or strangulation in bed. I want to call out that all rates have declined since the 1990s. This decline followed the release of the American Academy of Pediatrics Safe Sleep Recommendations, also known as the Back to Sleep campaign. According to the triple risk model, there are 3 factors which may increase SIDS risk. The first is the vulnerable infant. With the vulnerable infant, there may be an underlying defect or brain abnormality that makes the baby more vulnerable for SIDS. Sometimes this defect is in the part of the brain that controls respirations or heart rate or genetic mutations. At a specific critical developmental period, for example, the first 6 months of life, there is also rapid growth and there may be changes in homeostatic controls. These changes may be evident or they may be subtle. For example, variations in breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, or body temperature. There may also be subtle variations like change in sleeping or waking patterns. Some of these changes may destabilize the infant's internal systems temporarily or periodically. The third factor is outside stressors. And while most babies encounter and can survive environmental stressors, such as sleeping on their stomach, overheating, or tobacco smoke exposure, the already vulnerable infant may not be able to overcome these environmental stressors. While none of these factors are known to single-handedly cause SIDS, they may decrease a vulnerable infant's chance of survival. According to the triple risk model, all three elements must be present for sudden infant death to occur. First, the baby's vulnerability is undetected. Second, the infant is in a critical developmental period that can temporarily destabilize their systems. And third, the infant is exposed to one or more outside stressors that they cannot overcome. If caregivers can remove one or more outside stressors, such as placing an infant to sleep on his or her back instead of on the stomach to sleep, they may reduce the risk of SIDS. The mechanisms by which stomach sleeping might lead to SIDS are not entirely known. Studies suggest that stomach sleeping may increase SIDS risk, and they suggest this without certainty, but it may be caused by the baby rebreathing their own breath, by upper airway obstruction, or with problems due to issues with heat dissipation or a tendency to overheat. Aspiration is sometimes a concern, but there is no greater risk of aspiration with back sleep. Counter to what is expected, the windpipe is closer to the front of the body, and therefore gravity is more likely to send contents to the stomach when on the back. The baby may be more likely to aspirate to the lungs when on their stomach. To recap, there may be a higher risk of SIDS for children that sleep on their stomachs in a prone position, sleep on soft surfaces such as adult mattresses, couches, chairs, or under soft coverings, or if they get too hot while sleeping. Other factors that may increase risk for SIDS include exposure to cigarette smoke, sleeping in an adult bed, or birth preterm, before 37 weeks. What is good about this picture? Some observations you might notice. The tight-fitting crib sheet. The child is sleeping on a crib mattress. They are wearing a sleep sack that is not too loose and not too bulky. The child is not swaddled. Their arms are free. There are no blankets, no stuffed animals, pillows, or objects in the crib, and the child is on their back. The crib does not have crib bumpers. There are no cords or buttons. How about in-kind sleepers? Let's discuss these for a moment. Numerous recalls have taken place after many incidents. Consumer Product Safety Commission had an expert on biomechanics study inclined sleep surfaces. Among the many that were tested, none were found to be safe. They concluded that an incline of 10 degrees or less with flat and rigid surfaces were likely safe. For other kinds of sleeping devices, like play yards, bedside sleepers, please visit the Consumer Product Safety Commission's website for more information. Information on sleep products is extensive, In general, these items have federal mandates for the height of the sides and for other features of the product. However, this does not mean that products available are safe. It's best to review information on the website and to assist families with where to locate this information. Sleep positioners are also not safe, and there have been many reports to the Consumer Product Safety Commission that these present a risk for suffocation and entrapment. It is best to use a firm sleep surface. And here is the website for more information on the safety of sleep products. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends room sharing because it may decrease the risk of SIDS by as much as 50%. Room sharing also can make it easier for you to feed, comfort, or watch your baby. However, it is very important that when sharing information with families, you are clear to differentiate room sharing and bed sharing. While room sharing is considered safer than not room sharing, babies need to have their own firm and safe sleep surface. You can tell the family, for example, if you bring your baby into bed with you for breastfeeding or comforting, remove all soft items. When finished, put baby back in the crib. Swaddling is generally considered okay only for very young newborns that do not roll. However, they recommend against swaddling once the infant tries to roll over. Please be aware that co-sleeping is a term sometimes used for room sharing, but it's not the same. Bed sharing means sharing a bed, while co-sleeping is another term for room sharing. What's important here is that you get a clear idea of what the family means when they say they co-sleep, so that you can tailor information you share to best meet their needs. According to the National Institute of Health, research shows that it is less dangerous to fall asleep with an infant in an adult bed than on a sofa or armchair. Before you start feeding your baby, think about how tired you are. If there's even a slight chance you might fall asleep while feeding, avoid couches and armchairs. These surfaces can be very dangerous. If you think you might fall asleep while feeding your baby in an adult bed, remove all soft items and bedding from the bed before you start feeding to reduce the risk of SIDS, suffocation, and other sleep-related causes of death. Bed sharing is not recommended for any babies, and in certain situations may make bed sharing even more dangerous. It is more dangerous to bed share if your baby is younger than 4 months old. If your baby was born prematurely or with low birth weight, if you or any other person who will be in the bed is a smoker, if the mother of the baby smoked during pregnancy, if you have taken any medicine or drugs that may make it harder for you to wake up, if you've drank alcohol, if the surface is soft, such as a waterbed, an old mattress, a sofa, a couch, or an armchair, or if there is soft bedding. There is also a greater risk for bed sharing if the baby is sharing a bed with someone who is not the parent. Soft objects, loose bedding, and any objects are not safe to be in the crib. They may pose a risk for entrapment, suffocation, or strangulation. Here are some general recommendations for reduction of risk of SIDS and suffocation. It's important here to note that car seats, strollers, swings, and slings are not safe for sleeping. This also includes air mattresses and water beds, and especially couches and recliners. As healthcare providers and as childcare providers, whether you work in the home or whether you work in a medical center or childcare center, how do you promote safe sleep to reduce the risk of SIDS? In the recent past, there was a strong tendency to encourage abstinence and discussion of bed sharing. What we since learned is that we can be more effective at encouraging safer sleep practices by partnering with our families to have a conversation about the plans for baby's sleep. This collaborative conversation is known as harm reduction. We can use a warm, friendly, two-way conversation to reduce ambivalence and increase motivation to do these things. For example, while breastfeeding has many health benefits for mother and baby, and existing research indicates that babies who breastfeed or are fed breast milk are at lower risk for SIDS than babies who are never fed breast milk. And the longer you exclusively breastfeed, meaning not supplementing with formula or solid food for the first 6 months of life, the lower the baby's risk of SIDS. But the key thing is that breastfeeding is not what's best for every family. Therefore, in order to provide guidance on safe sleep, there is a need to assess the planned or current way of sleeping and to have a conversation about how they may increase the safety of the baby's sleep situation. You might ask, are they co-sleeping? Or do they mean room sharing or bed sharing? Then we must provide honest, evidence-based information and work to find common ground. In the absence of all known risk factors, SIDS still occurs. And despite our best efforts, it happens. So now we will shift gears for a brief moment. While it's outside the scope of this video to cover grief in detail, we want to make a few key points. The first is that everyone grieves in their own way. Grief is individual. There's no rule book, no time frame, no judgment. Grief is as individual as a fingerprint. Do what is right for your soul. We include this quote because we thought it was very telling of the very individual journey of grief. Next, we want to share with you that it's important to never underestimate the value of being a compassionate listener. Grief can be very isolating. And when talking with panels of experts who are parents that have experienced SIDS themselves, they often credit the support of those around them for helping them through their journey. For I tell you, nothing is too small, for it is simply enough to just have compassion. This is a brief video to review SIDS and measures that can be taken to reduce risk. In closing, we'd like to share briefly about the Professional Quality of Life website. While compassion is what we give to others, it must be restored. How many of us give compassion to ourselves? We can't talk about a difficult topic such as SIDS without addressing self-care. So if you're feeling fatigued, burnt out, or depleted, here is a website linked here on this slide that has great information for healthcare providers and other professionals. It's still applicable, and it covers compassion fatigue, secondary trauma, and burnout. I encourage all of you to reach out for support to trusted family, friends, mentors, or a counselor if you're feeling fatigue or burnout. Compassion, fatigue, burnout, and trauma affect us all, and we too need compassion for ourselves. In closing, I want to share with you the references used for this presentation and encourage you to take a look at the local resource list for grief and loss for Santa Cruz County. The resource list will be shared along with this video. For questions, you may contact Dominique Teaford at dominique.teaford@santacruzcounty.us. Thank you.